Welcome to the Inflection Podcast, where we explore the pivotal moments that have shaped us into who we are today. I am your host, Anabi, and I can't wait to dive into these moments with you. Let's get it. Thank you so much, Anna, for jumping on this iteration of the Inflection Podcast. I'm very grateful.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited, Chad.
Yeah, for sure. So, Zvook, I had to ask you how to pronounce that. Is it Zvook? Is that something you see a lot of customers ask? Like, how do you
Time.
Okay.
All the time. People have their own variations. I think it's a great icebreaker. I remember when we started, there were a few investors who were like, that's a horrible name. You have to change it. It's like nobody's gonna. But I'm like, what's in a name? I like that it's different. I like that people, when they actually learn how to pronounce it, they remember it.
Yeah, seriously. Now I will not forget. I think it makes it memorable too. When you struggle with the names for a while and then you figure out how to say it makes it stick more because you have to put in effort to figure out how to say it. Something
And I
there
mean,
for branding.
think about guys for Google, right? Or Uber or Airbnb or all these like weird, even Apple is such a weird name, right? But now we feel like they're icons. So I think people sometimes put a little bit too much, I think, emphasis on naming the company. Just name it. Just make sure that what you're doing actually adds value. And that's the most important thing.
I saw one of Steve Jobs' videos from a while ago, and he was talking about how Japanese companies, they focus so much on building a very solid product. And this is painting with broad strokes. Whereas in America, we find a lot of companies focusing so much on the marketing collateral and the brand and all of these meta stuff, which important, no doubt.
Yeah.
But sometimes to the detriment of, hey, can you just freaking do the work such that customers are like, yes, it's a no-brainer. And that's something for me that has been, I think about it as I build products again and again. Yes, branding, marketing, all that stuff is great. But if your product is not fantastic and amazing and people want to recommend it, then you could have the best sounding brand name.
I agree. There was a time, I think, right before COVID and in the early days of COVID, where if you had a really good branding and you could sell your startup, you could raise a lot of money. Now that's not even true anymore, right? It's like you actually have to have something more, something a little bit more than just a catchy name and like a cool pitch deck.
Yeah, that is funny. Which brings us to your venture, right? Your story is very fascinating. Hearing you've been down to your last $20 or something like that.
That's still very little.
Yeah, that is still crazy and having to grow from there. So let's peel back the layers just a little bit. The origin story, if you will, of the book and, what that looked like. And we can dive into some challenges along the way as well.
Yeah, actually, I was prior to Zvook. So I lived in Singapore actually for many years before I moved to America. And in Singapore, I ran a big tech startup event called Slush Singapore. So we worked with a lot, we gathered a lot of startups, investors, media from all over the world to come together and really elevate the local and Southeast Asian startup ecosystem. And so I think that was from me, the final push of, you know what, I want to build something on my own, but I'm not a techie. I've always been very fascinated by what technology can do as an enabler, but I have never coded a line in my life. So I knew that I needed to have a co-founder who was technical. And so I actually joined a startup program. This was back in Singapore by an early stage VC that kind of helps you to match you with some people with other skill sets. And through that program, I met 3 girls who I became really good friends with, right? So we're like 4 girls. We were all trying to build startups. And we said, you know what? Let's do a side hustle. Let's start a podcast. Let's drink wine and talk about entrepreneurship and leadership and women in business and all that stuff. So we're like, let's do it. We booked ourselves like a trip for the weekend to record the podcast. And I said, why don't we find a sponsor who wouldn't want to sponsor such great content, right? And I went online and I was trying to find a platform that would help me find advertisers for my podcast. And I was really surprised that I couldn't find any platforms. There were a lot of podcast networks, a lot of agencies, very old-fashioned ways of finding advertisers, very manual ways. And I said, hang on, how is this possible? And this was a few years ago, 3 years ago, right? Podcasting as an industry was really exploding. And I was like, how is this possible that there isn't this really quick and easy way for me as a content creator to find relevant brands? But also I was like, what if you're an advertiser and you're looking for certain type of content? How is it that you're unable to book host endorsements and podcast ads with just a few clicks when you could do that for any other type of advertising. And so that's really how Zvook started, right? That's really how I said, you know what? Let me build that since this doesn't exist. And I just saw where the industry was going with audio, with podcasting, and it's literally just, I think, exceeded everybody's expectations in terms of how fast the whole industry grows. And so we started building. We got our first very small check from that early stage VC where,
Nice.
and so I packed my bags and I moved to New York because I knew that our America is literally the biggest podcast advertising market. I didn't know anybody in New York. I moved here, was like, oh, I'm so excited. We're going to build the future of podcasting, blah, blah, blah. Year one goes by. We literally have nothing, no further funding, no, nothing. We're like trying to scrabble something together, being like, are we even doing the right things? Whatever small funding we had ran out. I personally came to New York with a 2-month personal runway, which is very stupid. I was like, you know what, let's do it. And we're going to raise our seed round. Let's go. And then the pandemic hit and I was like, oh my God. I was like,
Yeah.
it was all in. And so I was quarantining in my room, in a tiny little room in Brooklyn by myself. I had $200 in my bank account. My visa was ending in 3 weeks. So I had to technically leave the country. I was like, I don't even have money for a ticket. And that was I think one of the pivotal moments that I'm like, what the hell am I doing? Am I doing the right things? Should I trust myself enough to keep pushing or should I just step away? And it was during those times we started to speak with the VC that actually ended up writing us a first meaningful check just in time to save my butt, but also give us an opportunity to really start building the platform that we have today.
Oh my gosh, that is such an amazing story.
You always hear people like talk about entrepreneurial stories and you're always like, nah, like that can't be, like it's too funny to be true. But that's what happens when you're really invested in what you're doing. You push it and then you push it a little more and then you push it a little more. And sometimes people ask, oh, how long did you keep yourself until you were going to pull the trigger? And I was like, I was never going to pull the trigger. Like I didn't have a timeline. I just knew I wanted to make this work and I was willing to do anything that I had to do that.
So you had two options, succeed or succeed.
Exactly.
That's cool. So as a woman in tech, building pretty much this tech platform for advertising between podcasters, content creators on the one hand, and those looking to advertise and work with them, how has that looked like? What are some unique things you would say as a woman in tech that have equipped you to walk through that? Because I know it's not easy for women in technology and maybe even minorities in technology.
Yeah, I think I've always tried to not pay too much attention to the fact that I'm a woman, because I think that's one of the limiting mindsets that we might actually have. We are tuning ourselves into, oh, I'm this female founder. And so I'm going to go look for funding from female founder networks. I'm going to be going to female founder pitch competitions. And I'm going to be labeling myself as a female founder. At the end of the day, if you're thinking about it even from the fundraising perspective, from clients' perspective, they don't give a shit if you're a man or a woman or something else. Like they just want to use a really great product. So I think one of the things that sometimes we might limit ourselves by just thinking that, but I'm a female founder and it's supposed to be tough for me. We all know that less than 3% of venture funding goes to female founders. But if you think about it on a daily basis, you're like, what am I even doing here? I might as well just quit right now because it's so unlikely for me to get funding. Yet women do get funded, right? I got funded. Tons of other women get funded. So I think it's really important not to think too much about that. I think also when we talk about women in tech, there's just been a lot of, I think, conversations around how we need more women developers and women in STEM and kind of women on a technical side. And I think that's true, but I think that is also really limiting the number of women that are a part of the tech companies, because we also need women to lead tech companies, to be the CS, to be the CMOs, to be the chairman of the board, that we need women in all different functions of a tech company. And sometimes people might think, I'm not very technical, so tech company is not for me. But you don't have to code, right?
Sure.
I've never coded. And I've talked about this before as well, how women in tech does not mean just developers, right? Women in tech
Very true.
leaders, right? And I think we as women have a very unique opportunity to start building the kind of company culture that I think has been missing in the last maybe decade of the startup boom, right? When you think about all these and WeWorks and whatever, this kind of very bro-y startup culture, because a lot of them were guys and a lot of them were developers, and that's how they like to build businesses. but that does not work for everybody. We've seen a lot of the crash and burn stories. And so I think that we as women have a unique opportunity to show how we are able to lead tech companies that actually achieve greater success and don't crash and burn and actually create the kind of environments where people thrive and want to keep on building.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's very insightful. Along those lines, right? As you look back on your experiences, what are certain things now that you wish you knew when you started your entrepreneurial journey? Or one thing, if there's one that's glaringly obvious to you?
I think that probably I was very eager to try to take advice from a whole bunch of people, especially when your investors, right? We only actually took our first advisor on board at the end of last year, and he's been phenomenal. But before that, I've been connected with a whole bunch of quote unquote advisors, right? Just people that have maybe been in marketing 20 years ago or 10 years ago, whatever, right? Like, hey, you should speak with this person. And they go, oh no, this is not going to work. Here's what's going to work. And you're so inclined to listen because you were told as a founder, you should be open, you should not be too
Mhm.
cocky, whatnot. But I've started to realize that not all advice is equal. 99% of it is full BS, right? People telling you what they would do if they were you, but they're not you and they've never done what you've done. And
Yeah.
so I would say actually listen to this advice, listen to yourself and your gut a little bit more. I think that there are a few people that you should definitely choose that you surround yourself with who you trust 100%. Listen to those people advice, right? Listen to if they have some skin in the game, right? If they have done what you've done, right? If they've at least been a founder, being successful, right? Or maybe been in your industry. Yes, of course, have a few. But don't listen to everybody and their mother because that's not going to lead to anything that you're choosing in your own head. And I think yeah, that's something that I've learned that I wish I had thought about more in the beginning.
Yeah. And that is timeless advice, right? If you're listening to everyone, yeah, at the end of the day, you're listening to no one because many times if you listen to five different people, just pick five. A lot of the advice is going to be contradictory. So it's okay, which one? You're going to take two steps forward, four back, two to the side. And at the end of the day, you're not making as much progress. So I think that's very apt for not just even early stage, but yeah, so that was great. Thank you so much for sharing that. Again, I concur. If you listen to everyone, then you're not really gonna take steps forward. I think it's important along those lines, like you said, having a core group of folks of advisors in your corner that you trust, who know you and you can implement things that way versus being a student of everyone. But one of the things I'm curious about for you is what are some communities that have been helpful to you as a founder, right? Building this company. Because I know it's incredibly lonely as a founder many times. So what has helped you survive and thrive? What
Yeah,
community?
actually, literally what you said, it's just a community of other founders. I've been lucky that I've connected with founders from my investors' portfolios, right? Be it like through Slack groups, and then they would usually have some kind of meetups or opportunities to connect with the founders. And then you're connecting with a bunch, and then you always find a few that you like are maybe building something similar or are in a similar. And so you continue the conversations. That has been super helpful. And honestly, the biggest factor in me keeping my sanity is the fact that I can check in with some of the founder friends and I can vent to them. I love going out there, meeting new people, new friends, going to events and things like that.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. One book you would recommend?
A great book that I read that really just provoked a lot of thoughts was it's called Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. It's
Yeah.
actually great. And you would think that's more about routines and habits, stuff like that. But no, he's actually sharing a lot of really interesting thought processes about the business world and examples of companies that, let's say there's a poorly performing company. You would think, okay, let's cut costs to improve the bottom line, whatnot. And he actually explains how changing a very small habit within the company, for example, the fact that the management was more open for the team to report problems and challenges actually fix that problem of not performing or underperforming financially, right? It was really interesting. And so this is just, I think, really a testament to everything comes down to small little details. You wouldn't even think it's sometimes very indirect how changing a small habit can actually have such a massive effect on the end result. So I really recommend that book. It was great.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And to close, what is one thing, one piece of advice you would leave for the person on the precipice, whether starting a company or taking on a more leadership role, right? They're stuck, right, on the precipice. They're like, should I jump? Should I not jump? We all have fear, right? Fear holds us back. And one of the posts I think I added on LinkedIn today, on a comment I added on a post was, so courage, right? It's not the absence of fear. Courage is moving forward in spite of the fear.
Yeah.
It's telling fear to take a back seat. You're grabbing the steering wheel and you're telling fear, yeah, I see you in the back seat. You're going to talk all you want, but I'm still driving. And that was something we really talked about in the alt MBA when I did Seth Godin's alt MBA some years ago. And I see that in you. You've been able to make all these leaps and move. I bet you still have fear. You still have doubt. But in
Yes.
spite of it, so for those who are still on the other side, haven't moved forward yet, from your anecdotal experience, what is one thing or a few things you'd say to such a person?
Take the first step. It's super important, right? Because it's like when you are standing at the edge of a cliff and you look down, it's so scary. You're like, oh my God, can I jump? What's going to happen? You have all these fears about different scenarios that everything can go wrong, whatnot. Once you actually jump, you're in that free fall, you're already doing it. And you're seeing, hey, you know what? It's not that bad. It's actually way scarier to look down than to jump, right? Because when you're already in motion, it creates momentum. And when you create momentum, it helps you. It brings you something positive. It gives you the energy. And then you can start every single day after you've taken the first step. Every single day, you look at a day, you're like, you know what? Nothing bad happened. This actually isn't as bad. This isn't as scary. Oh, now I met somebody who, now that I told them that I'd taken the first step, somebody came in and helped me. This is great. I would never have met this person or they would never have helped me had I not actually started. And so I think taking that first step, and again, it can be very small, right? Small first step, build a
Yeah.
website or design a particular flow or go talk to 20 companies about something that you potentially want to start, right? And ask for their opinions and feedbacks. Like very small things actually result in that momentum. And I think momentum is really the key. So the movement, you have to keep moving, not always moving to the right direction. It's fine. You can course correct. That doesn't matter. But if you stop, that's when you die. And so really taking the first step and creating the movement and really believing yourself, right? It's funny when you're like, what advice would you say? Don't take advice. You know what I mean? Like, don't listen to anybody. Choose yourself. You are smart. And in most cases, probably smarter than most of those people that are trying to give you advice, right? Because you have this idea, you have this passion, you know what you want to do. Listen to yourself, believe in yourself, and yeah, don't listen too much advice.
Synthesize advice, but be able to walk through that and apply your own, make your own decision. Because
Exactly.
I think we're talking about this earlier. If you listen to everyone, then you're listening to no one. You're not going to make progress because advice sometimes is going to be very contradictory and flat out cancel out themselves. So
Yeah.
it's important to develop that the ability to be able to synthesize a lot of information, go through it, and then make a decision based on your own gut feel and the vector you're trying to go with. But thank you so much, Anna. It was
Thank you.
freaky to have you on the podcast, and I look forward to more conversations and to seeing as Zvook continues to grow.
I love that. Thank you so much, Anevi. It was a pleasure to be here.